Okay, everybody, thank you for tuning back. My next speaker is one of my dearest friends, and for me, the expertise of that person is unequivocal. That person helped me a lot while I was in the government and promoting the tourism. Her name is Sophie Ibbotson. She's a consultant. She's a resourceful person, and she's being an independent consultant for World Bank on tourism, and she has a number of other positions, but since our topic this time is going to be related to tourism, we're going to be talking about that. Hi Sophie, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Behruz, and thank you very much for the kind introduction.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Well, it became sort of a tradition. I'm starting with the same question to everybody. How COVID-19 changed your daily routine, and how the things are going on in the city where you're from and the country? So in a pretext, if you can talk us a little bit about that.
My job normally is in tourism development and tourism promotion. So I spend much of the year traveling around to different destinations, learning what's going on, providing advice to governments and to companies, and also taking journalists and tour operators to show them what destinations has to offer. Obviously, all of that work has come to a complete halt overnight. I'm grounded here in the UK, and it is likely that I won't be able to fly to any of the destinations I work with, at least for the next 3 months and possibly even longer. So my regular work has stopped, but what I am finding is that there is a huge need now for crisis management, for risk mitigation, and to put in place programs to make sure that the tourism industry survives and can rebuild once the crisis is over. So I'm still working in the tourism sector, still working on tourism development, but my focus has shifted from the very positive tourism growth and tourism marketing that we were doing before to risk mitigation and propping up the sector so that it still exists in 6 or 12 or 18 months time whenever people are ready to travel again.
So, well, I think this is an excellent time for this, because there are so many experts who can help certain countries, and it's not a secret that tourism and aviation and all the spheres around tourism were hit hardest, and tourism for the last 10 years, consequently, it increased, right? We never saw a decline. It was one of the biggest and fastest expanding spheres. And I think for the very first time in a decade, we're going to see a recession. It's a global recession, but it's going to be a big recession for tourism. So what is our topic, Sophie?
The short-term and long-term impact of coronavirus on the tourism industry. Okay. I'm afraid it's not going to be very positive discussion. I think that we have some serious problems immediate and on the horizon, and unfortunately the tourism sector, even once it recovers, and I sort of think of recovers in inverted commas, it's not going to be the same as it was before. We're going to see some very big changes, not all of which are for the better.
So then let's let's dive in. So we're talking about after COVID-19 prospects for tourism industry. So what do you think will be the short-term impact of COVID-19 on tourism industry?
The short-term impact is absolute devastation. In most of the destinations around the world, the high season hadn't even started when the crisis began. Winter sports, of course, there was some ongoing over the winter, but for most destinations, the spring, summer is when they get most of their tourists. And as we all know, the crisis really became very serious in February, March, and the expectations are that it will go on for at least 6 months in a serious phase, and then recovery could be 18 months after that. So the majority of companies operating in the tourism industry, whether they are airlines, whether they're hotels, whether they're tour operators, will see either no business or next to no business for the entirety of 2020. The airline industry in particular is on its knees. What we've seen is most airlines have grounded their fleets and they've laid off staff. Flybe, which is one of the European budget airlines, has already collapsed, and it looks like Norwegian Air is going to be the next to fold. Virgin Atlantic and many other, even quite large, well-known airlines have been calling for a government bailout to save them. And there is a very real concern that actually if flight schedules do not resume by the summer, that as many as 50% of airlines could fold completely. We're seeing 50%. The same situation right across the world and in all parts of the tourism value chain. Here in the UK, the Travel Trade Association, ABTA, has asked the government to step in to stop companies going bankrupt. And in many of the destinations I work, including places like Tajikistan and North Macedonia, governments and donors are being asked to provide emergency fundings to protect jobs and make sure there is still a tourism industry in existence once the recovery begins. Because most companies in any sector cannot survive if their revenues fall even by 30%, let alone being cut to zero.
Yeah, so I mean, this is very serious, and this like 50% of airlines, we're talking about dramatic impact. So
yes.
What in that essence, in those very harsh times, which destination and companies have responded proactively to this crisis?
I think we are seeing some good stories about destinations and companies which are tackling the crisis head on. I mentioned already about many countries are providing financial support in terms of grants or loans or delays on and freezes on tax to make sure that small companies in the tourism sector can survive. One of the things that I've seen Uzbekistan do, which I've been really impressed, was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as soon as they realised that the borders were closed and people would be stuck, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs actually took the initiative of organising repatriation flights, both for Uzbek nationals who wanted to come back to Uzbekistan, but also for EU and UK nationals who were in Uzbekistan at the time and would want to go home. That sort of activity is really, really important because without commercial airlines flying, people are unable to move around, but it also gives confidence in the destination and in the authorities that they do take a sense of responsibility towards the tourists that they have. It builds trust between the destination and the tour operators, between the destination and tourists in the future, that actually, yes, this is somewhere that I want to go because if there is a problem, they're not going to leave me stranded. We've seen a similarly positive, responsible attitude from some hotels as well. Obviously, not all hotels. There are some who have been in the news for all the wrong reasons. But we are seeing positive things of hotels being used for emergency accommodation for key workers, for example. Hotels being turned over for use by the homeless and other people who would have difficulty self-isolating otherwise. And also people with COVID-19 symptoms who have to quarantine. Some of the hotels like Claridge's, which is one of the famous hotels in London, and also the Millennium Hotel at Stamford Bridge are being provided for these uses free of charge. Other properties, I've seen some of the Marriott hotels, for example, in the States, are billing the authorities just at cost for the rooms. They're not making a profit at this time. And the activities such as these are important because not only do they help society as a whole get through the crisis, they also give the hotels a reason to keep going, hopefully cover some of their costs, but also the consumers who hear about these stories will have a very positive view of companies who do the right thing. And they're more likely to book with them in the future. People will remember companies who have gone above and beyond, even putting their conventional businesses aside, but to make sure that they are playing a positive part in the crisis response.
Yeah, as an addition, I think I can recall two interesting practices that one is a country that they've done during this time, which is notable, which is Estonia. I think Estonia launched a campaign, Stay Home, Travel Later campaign.
Yeah.
I think it shows a good sign of like emotional intelligence, but at the same time, they are letting the world know that there is a destination, travel Estonia later, now stay home. So it was like...
yeah, and it's showing that they put the interests of tourists ahead of profit. And that is something which is hugely, hugely important because sometimes the tourism sector, particularly the airlines, are seen to be very sort of grasping for money, whether it's charging for excess baggage or charging for drinks on the plane or charging to where you can sit. But actually it shows that there are companies and destination management organisations within the tourism sector who do not put profit first. Yes, profit is important, but right now the thing that is most important to everybody is making sure that people are safe, people are healthy. That is the number one priority.
Yeah, and the second example, I think I can recall the practice of Airbnb. I think it pledged a big amount of like money or the hotels or the rooms for the doctors around the world. So it has some sort of came up with a program that doctors and nurses who are in the battlefield of coronavirus combat, they can stay if they don't have property, because we know that many doctors have been relocated to other more cities where the situation is more severe. So I think this is good practice because there is a time to earn and there is a time to pay back society.
Exactly. And particularly with a company like Airbnb that has been controversial in the past because of some of their business practices, actually possibly this is their opportunity to make amends. Yeah. And I've been very impressed with their treatment of customers and treatment of hosts in the past month or so. I personally was supposed to be going to Bruges next month, yes, the beginning of May, and obviously had a booking which I will no longer be able to use. Airbnb has already sorted out all of their cancellation processes. They've made it very, very easy to cancel. If you're cancelling for COVID-related reasons, you get a full 100% refund, no questions asked. And they've also made a fund available for hosts to help cover the lost income. So it's a good example of responsible practice.
Excellent. So we talked about the short impact, but where is the light in the end of the tunnel? Where are we going to see start things to recover?
How long is a piece of string?
Yeah.
We are going to see recovery, but we're going to see staggered recovery. The first thing that we can expect to see recovery is in domestic tourism. And the reason for that is that when a country starts to feel that it is in control of the COVID situation and they start reducing the restrictions on their domestic population, people will want to go out, people will want to see their families, they'll want to go to a restaurant, maybe they'll want to have a weekend away with their partner, and a feeling that things are going back to normal. And those are aspects of tourism that can recover regardless of the wider international situation, regardless of which other countries have got their borders open, regardless of which airlines are flying. People will be able to get in their cars, get on the train and travel around within their own country. A couple of surveys have been done in China in the last month of communities which were under lockdown there, and the majority of people that they interviewed suggested that by August this year they will feel ready to travel again. And of the people interviewed, 77% said that they would be prioritising domestic travel, partly because of confidence reasons. They did not want to go abroad if the COVID situation somewhere else was ongoing and there would be a risk of catching it or bringing it back. So people, for confidence reasons as well as pragmatic reasons, are going to be looking to travel within their own countries first. The next kind of tourism we will see reviving will be business travel and other kinds of essential travel. So possibly people who have been stranded in a country looking to return to their home country or to wherever that they work. People who are travelling for medical reasons, for example, to seek treatment, or people who have got had family tragedies and might need to go to a funeral or to see family members for other serious reasons. Maybe somebody's in hospital and they need to see them. So we will see that kind of tourism coming back because that is perceived to be a more essential travel. I would say that business travel is likely to be reduced, partly because a lot of companies will have realised that they can function quite well with video conferencing and they can significantly reduce their overheads by having virtual meetings rather than face-to-face meetings.
Yes.
International leisure travel will be the last of the categories to recover, partly because of the international logistics of getting borders open and flights flying, but also because people are going to have much less disposable income. A lot of people will have lost their jobs or will have had to go deeply into their savings, and the money that they do have coming in will be they'll be prioritising their rent, food, and leisure travel will not be such a priority as before. So I think leisure travel will take quite a long time to come back. Singapore's Changi Airport, for example, which is one of the biggest transport hubs in Asia, have closed their Terminal 2 for the next 18 months. It won't open again until October, November 2021. And the reason for that is they don't anticipate the volume of flights and volume of passengers recovering to levels which justify having a second terminal open until 18 months from now. So I think for anybody who's looking for a ballpark estimate of when things will be starting to look back to normal, 18 months is the minimum we can expect.
We're talking about 18 months because leisure travel is one of the biggest sector, right? The ones you have suggested, it just adapt to like it's not a majority. It doesn't adapt to majority. So the
exactly
tourism sphere will be back on track, or at least will be as same as pre-COVID-19 is 18 months.
I think at that point we will still be in a recovery phase. I think in 18 months' time we will not be back to previous levels.
I see. Well, in these harshly hours, in such a difficult times, what tourism ministries and destination management organization can do to aid the recovery? What is the protocol for that?
The single most important thing which governments need to do, not just for the tourism sector, but all across the private sector, is make sure that there is a cash injection into companies to keep them running. The tourism sector, as I mentioned earlier, has been particularly badly hit with revenues down to more or less zero. And unless those companies get some sort of financial injection, they will disappear, they will go bankrupt. It's not a case of if, it is when. And the cash reserves that companies have will vary from a few days more to a few months, but ultimately, unless cash goes in, those companies will collapse. People will lose their jobs. And then even once the sector or the economy starts to recover and we're allowed to travel again, if the companies have collapsed, if their staff have left and had to get other jobs, we won't have a tourism sector left to revive. So the single most important thing they have to do is make sure money goes in to pay people's salaries, to cover their basic overhead so those companies can survive. The next round of things that tourism ministries and DMOs will have to do is think very careful about the regulations. I am anticipating that we will see much more regulation of the airline sector and probably also of travel insurance companies and tour operators and the sorts of parameters within which they can operate. And tourism ministries, of course, are going to have to set those regulations and decide what the standard business operating practices should be. I expect we are going to see travel insurance becoming compulsory, or certainly highly recommended, and tour operators who are selling packages will have to factor in an insurance or a risk premium for the government to ensure that there is a degree of consumer protection if an event such as this happened in the future. The third thing that I think tourism ministries and DMOs are going to have to do is think very strategically about their future tourism development and promotion. And there's going to need to be a lot of revision to their existing plans because the tourism ecosystem is going to look very, very different. Previously, a lot of destinations have looked at mass market tourism, at budget tourism, but because of the economic restraints that people are going to be living under, I think those markets are going to be very, very depleted for a long time. And therefore, if a country's development and promotional strategy is focused on budget tourism, it's not going to work anymore. They're going to have to look at targeting tourists who have got higher levels of disposable income and can actually afford the luxury of going on holiday. It's not a necessity, and although I and many of my peers have had the privilege in recent years of being able to jump on a plane whenever we fancy it and go to another European city for a long weekend or go long haul several times a year, most people are now no longer going to be able to do that. So that's going to require tourism ministries and DMOs to reorientate their strategies make sure that they understand their new target market and that the products that they are offering will appeal to them.
Okay. Regarding your thinking, what companies and what destination will be the best to recover or will have the fastest recovery from the COVID-19 effect?
The destinations which will have the fastest recovery will be those which have got good infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Firstly, in terms of flight connectivity, because people need to be able to get in and they need to be confident that they can get out again. People are not wanting to go, or will not be wanting to go somewhere that's very remote, because there is a concern that if something like this were to happen again, for example, a second wave of COVID or a variant of it in a year or so's time, they don't want to find that they are stuck somewhere that they can't get home from. Secondly, I think people are going to be much more concerned about hygiene, about sanitation, because they don't want to be catching COVID or any other kind of disease whilst they're travelling. And they're going to want to feel that the healthcare infrastructure in the destination that they're visiting is in a good state, because they don't want to risk ending up in hospital somewhere that cannot cope because it hasn't got the right equipment, the right trained doctors, and so on and so forth. So destinations which have got good flight connections, got good health infrastructure, and are perceived to have good health and safety and hygiene will be higher up the priority list and recovering faster than those that don't. Companies which are best placed for recovery, those who have been seen through this crisis to have looked after their partners and looked after their customers. Companies which have gone above and beyond to repatriate clients who have been stuck abroad, who have had fair cancellation policies, who have engaged with people's concerns constructively, who have returned money, who have not price gouged. Those companies will be much better placed to recover because people will remember those who did the right thing. Companies which have taken advantage of the situation, who have price gouged, who have paid dividends out to shareholders but then gone to a government for bailout, or who have left their customers stuck somewhere, will not do well, and they don't deserve to do well. They have ignored the fact that they have a responsibility to their customers and to their partners ahead of profit. Profit is one aspect of being a successful business, but you do need to be aware of the role that you play within the wider tourism and social ecosystem, and make sure that you are proactive in that area as well.
Well, I couldn't agree with this premise. I couldn't agree with this point of view, is that, well, there is so many years that those companies earned and made billions, millions. It doesn't matter, because for 10 years, for one decade, the tourism industry only grown. So all those companies in this year, they made money. So in the time of the need, I think you're paying back to society, and what you outlined, I think it makes perfect sense. And I think if you're a greedy one, and well, you don't survive, because you not only lost your current job, but you lost your future customers because you were greedy at the time, or you didn't pay your share, isn't it? So basically, I 100% agree with that. And but generally, it's going to change, right? It's like tourism is not going to be the same anymore, isn't it? So what do you foresee? What kind of changes are going to happen to tourism industry because of the coronavirus?
I think people are going to be much more interested in the sustainability of tourism. I think we have been forced to have a reality check to ask, is that journey necessary? Do I have to fly halfway around for that meeting? And what price am I prepared to pay? We've seen all over the world pollution levels dropping as a result of fewer flights. People are saying that the air quality in the cities that they live in is improved, that they can see the mountains for the first time because the smog has lifted. And these are not inconsequential things. Yes, it's great to be able to get on a plane and go somewhere cheap and have a holiday in the sunshine. But it is also important that we have clean air to breathe, and that our actions are sustainable in the long term. I've seen several reports that the cruise industry in particular is going to have major problems recovering, partly because people were already asking questions about their environmental credentials, but now because of the seeming risk of infections such as COVID spreading through cruise ships so rapidly, and those ships then spreading infections into port, I think those kinds of tourism have possibly seen the writing is on the wall, and passengers are not going to want to put themselves at risk and are not going to want to support aspects of the tourism industry that they see as questionable.
Interesting. And okay, we talk about the industry itself, but what about people? How the tourist priorities are going to change? Are they going to change? Is it going to be the same after effect? We're going to go. Is it going to be same, or is it going to change?
I think the priorities have to change. Some people will want to get back to business as normal and get on the first flight which is available out of their home airport and go wherever. But I think a lot of people will be thinking more seriously about where they travel, what for. I think people are going to be, I mentioned earlier, valuing the infrastructure much more. I think people are going to be asking many more questions about hygiene, and are not going to put up with being packed into a plane or into a train like animals on their way to slaughter. People are going to want to have more space. People are going to want to perhaps take more staycations because they don't then have to expose themselves to the risk of international travel. We might see people more likely to take an Airbnb or a holiday cottage rather than staying in a hotel, because they have a little bit more space around them. They can control their environment a little bit more. So I think those sorts of priorities are going to come up. I think also in the short term, we will see a lot more family travel, both of families travelling together, but also of people travelling to see friends and family, because the forced self-isolation will have made a lot of people rethink what their priorities are and value the people that they've been estranged from. So I mean, I am speaking from my own example, but I hope typical of other people, the first trip I will take when I'm allowed out of my house again will be to go and see my parents. And I think a lot of people will be in a similar situation. I want to spend more time with my parents. I want to be able to go and see my grandmother. I want to see my friends. And therefore, if I have got holiday time available when I'm off work, I'm going to prioritize those sorts of trips rather than perhaps a 2-week package holiday in the Mediterranean.
Okay. Well, basically, I think it was a really fantastic talk. We kind of covered all that part, but I have one secret question. Although I'm not working in a tourism ministry of Uzbekistan anymore, for me, it's not a work. For me, it's a hobby. I don't do it for money. I want my country to be out there and very well known. And I would like to thank Sophie for helping me while I was in the Ministry of Tourism promoting Uzbekistan. She's done incredible work. So whoever sees us, if they're from the Ministry of Tourism of other country, there are very few people who understand and who deeply committed to their work if they're working with a destination. So please look out for her, and she's a very open-minded person. And she actually helped us to create World Influencers Network, and she made a tremendous help of organizing first World Influencers Congress, which I think became very sensational, because for very small money, we could make such a big impact and brought Uzbekistan out there. So this pretty long stuff I'm talking about brings me to my topic, what it is in there for Uzbekistan. What is your suggestion? What is going to be, and what Ministry of Tourism of Uzbekistan and Vice Prime Minister Abdul Hakim should do?
I think the focus has to be on confidence building. on confidence building domestically to make sure that tour operators, hotels and other people in the tourism value chain know that the government will support them, that it will support them financially, and that it will support them going forwards in the capacity building and marketing of the destination. I think Uzbekistan is well placed in that it still has a state airline to make sure that its airspace stays open, that people will still be able to get in and out of Uzbekistan, which is not the case for destinations reliant on other countries' airlines. So that will be a strength, and hopefully we will see Uzbekistan Airways servicing more routes and bringing people reliably into and out from Uzbekistan. I know that this year a number of events within Uzbekistan will have to be cancelled because of COVID, but 2021 will be the 30th anniversary of Uzbekistan's independence. So I think that's a prime opportunity to promote the country, to invite people back, that there are good foundations that Uzbekistan can build on. And actually, okay, 2020 might be a write-off from a tourism perspective, but Uzbekistan can use the 30th anniversary as a springboard for future growth. And I expect actually that the tourism sector in Uzbekistan will recover quite well, and that there is a lot of resilience within Uzbekistan, public and private sector, and a determination to succeed.
Well, I think those are the excellent comments. I have nothing to add more, only hope that they will listen and other countries will listen. I think it was a fantastic talk. We're gonna link down below Sophie's contact numbers and contact emails. So if you have any questions, you can always ask from her. But other than that, it was fabulous talk. Sophie, thank you very much. Please stay safe, and I really hope to see you around.
Thank you, Behruz. It's always a great pleasure working with you.
Thank you. And